We're closing out Week 7 with a rare matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the Houston Texans. The Texans are coming off their bye week. Will the extra rest give them the strength to topple Darnold and the Seahawks at Lumen Field? We'll see in the simulation. But first, let's get behind the bar and make our drink a Pacific Pollinator.
Okay, I thought this was a weird matchup, and after a little bit of research, it turns out my spidey sense was right. As far as I can tell, this game is tied with 49ers Texans for the least common NFL matchup out of all of the teams. As the youngest team in the league and being in the AFC South, the Texans have only played each of the NFC West teams 5 times so far, with the exception of the Rams, who they've already played once this season, and the Cardinals, who they played in 2023 for some reason. So a rare matchup between two teams with two very different vibes. This should be an interesting cocktail. And speaking of vibes, Seattle's representative leans into those immaculate Pacific Northwest vibes with the Pacific Northwest Sparkler. This drink comes to us courtesy of Headwind Vodka, which is a distillery located in Portland, Oregon, so just a little bit south of Seattle. It's a really straightforward sparkling cocktail, similar in many ways to the Cherry Blossom cocktail for Washington last week. Specifically, it calls for vodka, you gotta plug that product, elderflower liqueur, lemon juice, blueberry juice, and sparkling wine. The blueberry juice is actually a really interesting touch, as Washington is the state that produces the most blueberries out of any state in the US. Similarly, Houston's representative this week draws from one of its biggest exports. No, it's not Dr. Pepper, though we may see that in a future matchup. It's Beyoncé, specifically a cocktail created for her new liquor brand, the Honey Bay. The Honey Bay consists of whiskey, lemon juice, and honey syrup, and if you're paying attention, that spec might sound pretty familiar. Indeed, this is basically just a slightly tweaked version of the Gold Rush, San Francisco's cocktail from Week 5. Now, is this just a lazy corporate creation? Yeah, probably. But honestly, if you're looking to make a cocktail that predominantly features whiskey and honey, because, Queen Bee, you really can do a lot worse than rolling with the bulletproof recipe that is the Gold Rush. It does also make 2 minor deviations from the Gold Rush's standard spec, which I honestly can't really figure out. The first one is pretty straightforward. It's serving it up in a coupe instead of down in a rocks glass over a cube of ice. This one makes sense to me. Coupes tend to photograph a little bit nicer, and with this drink, you don't really need the additional dilution that ice is giving you, so just changing the glassware and removing that ice makes a lot of sense. The second change is dropping the amount of honey syrup down from 3/4 of an ounce to 1/2 an ounce. And this one I just can't explain, right? The honey is one of the 2 main points of emphasis in this cocktail, but you're decreasing it? And you can't even say that they're doing it to put more emphasis on the whiskey, which is the product they're actually trying to move, because they keep the lemon juice the same. Well, I may not be able to get inside the head of whoever made the Honey Bay, but at least y'all always get to know my thought process behind these drinks. So for our Pacific Pollinator, I knew I had to keep the 2 most distinct elements from both of our inspirations, that being the whiskey and the blueberry juice. And from there, it was all about picking ingredients to keep in that would add some character to this drink. So the final spec is going to be 1.5 ounces of our whiskey. In my case, I'm using a rye whiskey. I would probably recommend not using a rye. I would recommend using something a little bit smoother, but this is just what I happen to have on hand, so it's what I'm gonna use. I don't think it'll be bad. We'll just add a bit more bite to this drink. Then 1/2 ounce of our Elderflower Liqueur, kind of staying on that floral theme that we're gonna get more of with the blueberries later. We're talking pollinators, elderflower, natural combination there. 1/2 ounce of our honey syrup, again staying on theme here, staying on brand. This is also going to add some sweetness to this drink, and of course, tie into the inspirations. 1/2 ounce of our lemon juice, some much needed acid to brighten this drink up. And then finally, the main thing giving us color, our blueberry juice. This was surprisingly not difficult to find, but because I just got it at Whole Foods, but it was basically it was Whole Foods or nothing. There was nowhere else that was just selling pure blueberry juice. If you can't find blueberry juice, one thing you could do to get a similar drink is use blueberry jam or a blueberry syrup instead. That'll get you that blueberry flavor. Just, you'll probably want to adjust the ratios because blueberry juice is obviously less sweet and less syrupy than a syrup or a jam. Anyways, shake that all up. Oop. All right. And then we are going to strain that into our coupe glass. And I've prepared a little garnish of 3 blueberries. Pretty much exactly the color I expected this drink to be. Boop. And so there we have it, our Pacific Pollinator. Let's give it a try. Ooh. Okay, wow. Ooh. That drink has a long evolution. I was not expecting this long of an evolution to come from this drink. Wait a minute. So up front, immediately on the tip of your tongue, is that Elderflower Liqueur. I think it actually comes through much more strongly in this drink than it has in past drinks. Really, all of those sort of, complex floral notes, those are right up front, but they also fade out pretty quickly. And as they're fading out, it's the sort of longer, more stable floral notes from the honey that come in instead. So you get this like very sort of chaotic, all of those little notes. And then the honey is sort of like more, toned down, but still, floral notes come through. And on the very end, I was not expecting this to come at the end. The back of this drink is actually where the blueberry flavor comes through. I thought the blueberry flavor was going to be right up front, that it was going to be this sort of like rush of sweetness that you tend to expect from something like that. But it's actually way at the back. It's this sort of odd modifier that comes in late once you've gone through that entire floral evolution. Damn. And the rye whiskey, I thought this rye, this is a pretty strong rye whiskey. It's not, certainly the harshest out there, but this isn't, your super smooth, golden honey type of bourbon. This is a rye. This has some bite to it, but it doesn't actually overwhelm or punch through this drink too much. It plays a pretty subdued role among all of these things, which is surprising because there's only half an ounce more of the rest of this concoction than there is the rye whiskey, right? It's not like this is just half an ounce of rye that's being drowned out by other things. These are roughly equal parts, but this mixture of the flavors is just so strong, but not overpowering. It's just it's so solid that the rye doesn't sort of break it up or disrupt it at all. Huh. I think one of the other things this drink is making me realize is I don't think I've ever had straight up blueberry juice before. Obviously, I had a lot of blueberries, love blueberries. No disrespect to Washington, but as a New Englander, I've got to give it up for the Maine blueberries. That's where my heart's at. But I don't think I've ever had straight blueberry juice. And you get there's a lot of actual flavors there that are obviously blueberry flavors, but that don't come through when experienced as a blueberry pie, or in a smoothie. There are more subtle flavors that come through and in juice form that you don't get in those other forms. And I might have to do more things with that blueberry juice. That's an interesting ingredient now that I think about it. Damn. Yeah, it's funny, like, describing the evolution of this drink almost feels like describing like a radioactive decay chain or something, you know, where you've got like these really sort of crazy notes that come in and then die out pretty quickly. And those are replaced by more stable ones, which then in turn fade out. And you're just sort of left with those, you know, the after products of that like blueberry. Very interesting. All right, well, a rare matchup produces quite the incredible drink. We'll see if they can put a similar product on the field in the simulation.
The Seahawks get the ball first here at Lumen Field, starting off with a strong return that puts them at the 36-yard line. From there, their offense flies down the field as Darnold connects with the tight end Arroyo on play action for a 14-yard TD to open the scoring. The Texans' offense fails to get off the ground, while Seattle continues to soar. At the end of the first quarter, play action again. This time the pass is to fullback Brady Russell, who is completely open in the flat and scores from 5 yards out. The second quarter starts better for Houston as they make it all the way to the 14-yard line, but the Seattle defense crushes Stroud in the pocket on third down, forcing the Texans to kick the field goal for their first points of the game. The ball's rolling now, though, and the Texans defense gets a stop. With 1:30 left in the half, the offense finally finds the end zone as Stroud hits a streaking Dalton Schultz for the 22-yard touchdown. Seattle's 2-minute drill has them within Texans' red zone with 36 seconds left in the half, but a strip sack recovered by Houston robs them of any chance at points before halftime. The Texans pounce on this opportunity as a couple of big plays like this 20-yard pass to Woody Marks puts them in prime field goal position with 5 seconds left. From there, they hit the chip shot field goal to make this a 13-14 game at the half. Coming out of the half, from their own 38, Stroud says, "Fuck it, Nico Collins down there somewhere," and heaves up a 62-yard bomb, which finds its intended target running a solid yard ahead of his defender into the end zone for the Texans' first lead of the game. Trying to extend this newfound lead to 3, they go for 2, but multiple Seahawks defenders are in the backfield, stuffing the run before it had any chance. The Seahawks are trying to answer back on their next drive, but this quick slant to Coupe is picked off by Azeez Al-Shaair, killing another promising drive. The Texans again capitalize on the turnover as Nick Chubb punches it in, mostly untouched from the 3-yard line, making this a 2-score game. Now, it may have been a rough third quarter for the Seahawks. They start off the fourth strong as Darnold hits Torrey Horton for a 19-yard TD to cut the Texans' lead to 5. After a strong defensive stop, Seattle's offense is back on Houston's side of the field. This time it's JSN doing work after the catch, taking this in for a 25-yard TD to retake the lead for the Seahawks. Seattle decides to go for 2, and K9 just walks in untouched, extending this recovered lead to 3. However, the Texans regain their third quarter form, marching down to the 8-yard line, where Stroud finds Dalton Schultz in the back of the end zone for his second TD of the game. Texans back on top. With only a minute left in the game, we're not off the roller coaster yet, as Darnold hits Arroyo on the short pass, who somehow weaves through the Texans' defense and takes this pass 23 yards for the go-ahead touchdown. A minute was clearly far too much time to leave on the clock, though, as a few big plays and a defensive holding penalty puts the Texans on Seattle's 3-yard line, and Stroud connects, putting Houston up 4 points with under 20 seconds left. Despite moving the ball well, the Madden AI sabotages any chance the Seahawks might have had at a miracle comeback, and the seesaw finally stops. Texans win 40-36. Well, we've got a true shootout in this game, and we didn't even have to go into overtime to settle it. The Seahawks have demonstrated their ability to light up the scoreboard multiple times this season, so this would definitely be a more surprising result for the Texans, who only broke 30 points in their game against the Ravens. They did put up 44 on said Ravens, though, so not crazy to think that these teams could get into a boat race. Both of these quarterbacks really fueled the shootout, throwing for over 800 combined yards and 9 total passing touchdowns. Sam Darnold slightly edges out Stroud in terms of volume, but he did have 2 interceptions in this game. Now, to be fair, the first interception was on a Hail Mary at the end of the first half, so that one doesn't really count, but his second did ultimately lead to their defeat in this game. Stroud had no such errors, coming only 4 points short of a perfect passer rating. As for the running backs, they existed. Nothing particularly notable for good or bad in this game. Nick Chubb led the way with 54 yards on 13 carries, as well as the only rushing TD of the game. K9 had a quiet but respectable game, averaging just shy of 4 yards per carry on his 10 attempts. Stroud's rushing numbers are really the only other thing of any interest here, and while 45 yards is on the higher side for him, it's still well within his historical performances. I may be wrong, but I believe this is our first Madden game with 2 100-yard receivers, and in fact we almost had 4. Nico Collins and JSN are our 2 big winners, each catching a touchdown in addition to their 142 and 155 yards respectively. The rookie tight end Arroyo also had a breakout game, catching 6 balls for 98 yards and 2 TDs. For more context, that's more yards and 2 more TDs than he has on the entire season as of writing this. Our biggest loser in this game has probably got to be Cooper Kupp. Despite all the offensive fireworks, he hauled in only 2 catches for 29 yards, and neither of those ended in the end zone. As expected, we see some pretty major regression in the passing stats transitioning over to the Monte Carlo sim, with CJ Stroud really getting a rough deal, as his yardage drops all the way down to 165. The running backs are left largely unaffected, though Zach Charbonnet gets involved a little bit with 25 rushing yards and a catch. Along with the passing regression, of course, comes corresponding drops in receiving yards, though JSN and Nico still lead their respective teams. On the scoreboard, this matchup is the exact opposite of the Madden sim, a pure defensive brawl. The most common outcome is a 14-7 Seahawks victory, and the Texans were actually shut out in 10.5% of the simulated games. Now the average outcome is a bit higher than the mode, but it still favors Seattle, predicting a 16-12 victory. Alright, looking over the AFC standings for Week 7, we see that the AFC North and East are both still upside down. For the East, these Madden standings are pretty much the opposite of both reality and everyone's expectations, while the North looks pretty much like what we all thought it would be preseason, but somehow we live in a universe where the Steelers are comfortably on top of the AFC North. The Chiefs are back atop the AFC West, in another significant departure from our wacky reality. Finally, all of the AFC South is below 500, because who could have seen Indiana Jones coming, or the Jaguars for that matter. Over in the NFC, both the Packers and Eagles are undefeated in our simulated games. I don't think anyone foresaw them losing to the Browns and Giants respectively. Speaking of the Giants, they are actually in the correct spot in the standings, even if their record is wrong. The Rams seem to have basically swapped places with the Cardinals in the NFC West, in terms of reality versus simulation, and for some reason all of the NFC South is above 500. In that division, it looks like Atlanta and Tampa have swapped places. Do you agree with the simulations, or do you envision a different future? I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. As a reminder, our drink for this matchup is the constantly evolving, floral Pacific Pollinator. If you make it, please let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear your suggestions for what drink should be your team's representative. Stay curious, stay thirsty, and I'll see you in the next one.